Hey guys, David Robinson here. Welcome to the Apartment Investing Journey. Got another great guest for you today. We have a former Marine with 3 combat tours, retired fire lieutenant after 12 years of service, and a full-time real estate investor and developer in the Boston market. And so, Josue Velney, welcome to the show. I appreciate you coming on.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Yeah, my pleasure. So we were talking before we started the recording here, and Jose was sharing an experience about him being quiet. I'm hopeful that he's not going to be quiet during this interview. So, Jose, we gave you a very, very brief bio, and thank you for your service, by the way.
You're welcome.
We want to hear the whole story. You've got a great backstory, and you've accomplished some great things, and we want to hear about that process that you've been through. And so if you don't mind, let's back up and let's talk about that journey that you've been on. And maybe you can start with when you started to explore, maybe when you were, let's start with when you started to explore real estate investing and what that looked like for you.
Yeah, no, absolutely. 2009, I got out of the Marine Corps. I left the service in hopes to, to move home and still serve my community. So I joined the fire department where as you said, did 12 years there. And through that process, I was renting when I first got home, and I had an H2 Hummer. For the love of the Marine Corps, I bought after 2 combat tours, I wanted to get my own H2. so I had an H2 Hummer, and I had nowhere to park it. And I was complaining, we in Boston, we got a lot of snow. So nowhere to park. The landlord had a parking space that was always empty, but never for me. So I was complaining to one of my friends, and he goes, "Don't you understand? Whoever has the gold makes the rules." And I said, "What do you mean?" He goes, "Well, if you want, why don't you just buy your own house and you have your own parking spot?" And I said, that makes a lot of sense. So that's how my journey started in real estate. From that point on, I started educating myself. I started going to meetups. I started going to first-time home buyers. And at the firehouse, there's always at least a handful of guys that have multiple units. So I started really asking them questions until they shut their door and refused to talk to me, So I just kept beating down that door of education. And, education has been really where I got my growth from. And one thing in the Marine Corps, we have a budget from the Navy. So we have the smallest budget. So we don't have a lot of resources, so we learn to be resourceful. And that's really where my career took off, when I put those 2 things together with the training that I was able to do in the Marine Corps, and just putting all the pieces together. So my first property, I bought it in the city of Somerville. I bought it for $450,000. And through that process, what I learned is I negotiated my own deal with the seller prior to my real estate agent coming on site. They were a little late. But the beauty of it is, through that process, I learned that I could put down, 3.5% down. So I figured I'm going to need about $20,000 for the deal. I'm going to need about $4,000 to close. Well, through the educational process that I went through, I ended up putting down about $3,000 all set in when I was in. And basically how that happened was I got $5,000 from the city of Somerville. I got $8,000 because the President Barack Obama was giving veterans another $8,000 for serving the country and buying property. And then I also got the attorneys my closing attorneys to pay the down payment for me too, for another $5,000. So with all said and done, I put down only $3,000 on a property that's worth 1.1 today.
Okay, well, we got to dive into that a little bit. I love the thought and the concept, the mindset of, even if you don't have a lot of resources, you can be resourceful, right? And looking for ways to be creative. And that's what I want to dive into today with you is talking about getting creative with deals and breaking through some of those limiting beliefs and barriers that a lot of us have as we're trying to get started in the real estate business. And so I think this is first deal is probably a good example. Let's talk about that a little bit. Help me to understand how you went from, you broke it down, right? You put, you got $5,000 from the city, $8,000 from the government because you're a vet. What I am curious about is how'd you get your closing attorney to pay a portion of your costs as well?
Well, we were supposed to close on November 1st and they couldn't close on November 15th. And I was like, listen, I don't have a place to live. I don't know what I'm going to do. We got to figure something out. But like I said, I'm a good negotiator. And I already talked to the seller and I said, hey, I know you said that the person on the first floor was leaving because that's the unit that I wanted. And you are not leaving anyway because you can't until you can go to Florida. I go, what if I just rent out the first floor early? And for those 2 weeks, and he goes, no, I'll do one better. Thank you for your service, and you can live there until we close. And we actually drove to the closing table together.
Oh,
And him
wow.
and I, yeah, we talk annually. We still talk every year.
Interesting.
Yeah, no, that was really how I was able to put that structure that deal together.
Okay.
And through that process, like I said, I used to go to so many open houses, and I knew that I had to close that deal before other people, because in Boston and the Somerville market, there's so many good investors. There's a lot of people with so much money, but what it is, like, a lot of people don't realize that money is only one aspect of a deal. Emotions play into it, why they want to do it, and if you can tell that story to a seller, it definitely helps. It's not going to help you close every deal, but it will help you close some.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. So let's talk about what your business looks like today, and then we'll sort of bridge the gap between that first deal and where you're at today. What does your business focus on?
Right now, my business is heavily focused on development. We don't forget where we come from. So what I like to say, construction is my vehicle, but generational wealth is my destination. So the goal is always to multiply as many units as we can under our umbrella. So eventually, I can pass that on to my children. I can do better things for the community. And that's really the focus, especially as a developer. I develop in the same community that I live in order to build bigger, better, and improve that area. The neighborhood has to buy in. And before they buy into my project, they have to buy into me.
Yeah. And so, just for our listeners, to add some clarification here, when a lot of our listeners hear development, they think of raw ground up development. My understanding, and having guests on from the Boston market and from the East Coast, development in your world isn't necessarily ground up. It could be deep value add renovations of existing units. Is that correct?
Yes, that is correct. However, I am a developer, so I do build ground up.
Gotcha.
Mostly, I have a bachelor's degree in construction management, so I'm very comfortable in that environment, and that's part of, like, when I talk about my military strategy, I found that that was a missing gap in the development world, that a lot of investors, they were fine with rehabbing 2 units, 3 units, but if you ask them to do new construction, they don't know where to start.
Yeah.
And on top of that, if you tell them to build bigger than 4 units or 5 units, it's forget about it. So because I filled that gap, I feel like I literally shut off my marketing, because I can just wait by the phone. Somebody's like, hey, I got this land. Hey, you want to develop on it? And I go, sure, send it over. Let me take a look at it.
So that was going to be my next question: is how are you currently finding opportunity? What what are you targeting? What are you looking for? And B, how are you finding it?
I'm finding I have a lot of great relationships with agents. So I'm a licensed real estate broker. However, I make it upfront to everybody that I talk to that I do not plan to use that. That's like a secondary. That's like friends and family type of thing. And that if your agent brings me a deal, I'll put them into the deal. I'll figure out a commission split, whatever it takes to get that deal to make it work for everyone. And since I've done that, more deals are going to come to me, because, like I said, those guys that are really rehabbing those 2 and 3 units, those are real estate agents. And then the other agents thinking, hey, this guy's my competition, but really I'm not their competition. So they're more than happy to bring those deals to me first.
Gotcha. So it sounds like your real estate agent network is your main source of deal flow. Is that what I'm hearing?
Absolutely. That is part of my deal flow. The other part of my deal flow is definitely JVing with more seasoned investors. And the reason why those relationships work for me is because most of the time they're senior to me, they know more, but they don't have the time or the energy. And I'm go, go, go. I'm like, hey, I'll take care of it. You know, if that phone call comes at 9 p.m., I'll take care of it. So, it's so interesting that everybody's always looking for that mentorship. And I'm always looking for that JV partnership, especially with those seasoned investors, because they have so much knowledge. They want to pass it down. But they're looking for somebody that's hungry.
Yeah.
That's the key. And I'll give you a perfect example. The project that I'm doing, the 28 unit project, that investor, that developer, I met him years ago. And I asked him, I said, hey, how do I get to your level? What do I have to do? And he said, easy, go to Wentworth. Go to Wentworth Institute of Technology, and they have a construction management program. They'll teach you how to do it. So I said, okay. So a couple months back, I bump into him and I say, hey, I went to Wentworth. I graduated. Him and I start laughing about it. It's like a big joke. And then a couple of days later, he calls me. He goes, hey, how would you like to build 28 units with me?
Wow. That's great.
And it was because I took that first step.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Okay. So joint venture with more seasoned investors, real estate agents, any other sources that you found to be effective at this point in time to identify opportunity for your business?
Absolutely. MLS. You know, a lot of people seem to think that, MLS, you're not going to find a deal because there's so much competition. However, if you change that mindset and you start thinking, okay, well, how can I make this deal work? And some other investors are not thinking the same way. It's really gonna you're just gonna see it. So I'll give you an example of a deal that I'm currently working on now. Is I just bought a two family in Roxbury, which is a neighborhood in Boston, and I bought it for 920,000, and it was on the market for 900. Part of the reason why I wanted this property is because I own three doors down, and I had some other landlords in that area that wasn't keeping the place clean. So I said, you know what, I'm going to buy this whole street, as many as I can, and then I'll keep it clean myself. So basically, what I was able to do is I saw this, and I was like, nobody's going to pay this much for this two family, and I go, how do I make this work? Well, as I dived in deeper, talked to some other investors, and they're like, whoa, there's land here. Why don't you just buy the two family and then build on the land? And that's exactly what I'm doing. So let's say, for example, right, they're selling me an overpriced $920,000 property. I'm buying a property that I think the two family is worth probably around 800,000, but that land to me is worth at least 300,000. So for me, the value was there, and that deal wasn't easy too, but a couple of things that also helped make that deal happen. As a real estate broker, I made a commission off buying my own house. So that always helps. The second thing I did is I went old school. I sent the seller a letter. I said, listen, hey, I might not be the highest person, but this is the reason why I want it. I want to be part of this community. I want to keep this community clean. And that really clinged on to him and their agent team. And they really wanted to work with me because of that reason.
Yeah, love it. That's great. Good tips. And again, going back to maybe you don't have all the resources, but you're going to be resourceful, seeing opportunity where others may have passed up on it. That's great. So let's talk about, if you don't mind, I'd like to talk about this 28 unit development deal that you're actively working on. What's the scenario with that? What does that deal look like?
Well, right now, we're going to have 24 of the units is going to be market rate, and 4 of them is going to be affordable. And we're still working out a lot of the details, but roughly in this area, condos, it's going to be like 2 bedroom. Some of them are 2 bedrooms, some of them are 3 bedrooms. They're going to sell for somewhere around 500,000.
Interesting. So you're building it to sell?
Correct. We're building it to sell. A lot of the things, half the stuff that we do now, we sell. Some of the stuff we keep. Like I said, the one that I just purchased with the 2 family, I'm going to keep that in my rental portfolio. But we just been able to figure out a way to selling these condos help us to create more value to the neighborhood, and also give us more money to buy more property, more rehab properties to build the portfolio.
Yeah. And do you have any criteria that you follow to determine if you're going to build it to keep or build it to rent? And I'm assuming that maybe it changes depending upon what your cash flow looks like, what your cash position looks like, what deals you have in the pipeline. But is there any specific criteria that you follow to determine buy and hold or buy and sell?
Yeah, for the most part, a two family, it's not gonna work. It's just not worth for us to keep it. So we're gonna sell them. And from as where I am in my career now, those are easy for me. So the reason why I say that, like I have one project I'm working on right now. We started this March 15th, and we're about a month out to finish. So if you can start and you can get it done within 6 months from dig into the ground and build the whole thing and get ready to sell, it's really streamlined at this point doing that. Threes, most of the time it works, but it's usually how much we can buy the project for. Some of them is just like it could go either way. So I have also have a 7 unit project that we're going to be starting, and that's going to be consists of there's a two family now. We're going to rehab the two family and add 5 units onto it. So we're going to sell those, but I think we bought it cheap enough that we could have kept it. So in the city of Boston, what you have to do is something like a two family. You have to go through the zoning process and to figure out how many units that you can build. With that number 7, we could have went either way.
Interesting. Okay, great. Well, let me ask you what's on the horizon for you from a business perspective, considering where we're at in the market, and maybe you can give us some insight into your local market and what that looks like. But do you have any plans with your business that may be changing as a result of where we're at in the market cycle?
No, I don't see any change. Honestly, right now, couple of things that helped me is, for one, I started really early. So when I bought something at 450,000, that's worth 1.1. Recession is not going to bring it down to that number. So some of those things definitely make it a little more insulated for me at this point. But I just see that as long as there's a good rental market, as long in the city of Boston is very insulated between the universities, the tech that's coming in, the hospitals. So we're very insulated in that. But I just really bank on my gut and the educational process. And I know some of the people and that listen to your podcast, they talk more about bigger projects and bigger units and stuff to that nature. And I've always looked for people that could teach me, right? That can get me to the next level. And I've never ever. I always try to add that value before they would teach me. And so, for example, when going back to when you're talking about my first unit, and because I feel like the first unit's always the easiest. The first one is always the easiest because you can put the low percent down, and as it gets a little bit harder. And so what I had to do at the time is I started buying in Western Mass. So I said, okay, I'm going to start going to Western Mass. I'm going to buy the properties at that time were about 120 to 200,000. And I started buying 2, started buying 3. I got a little more comfortable, and I hired a property manager, but they were phenomenal. At the time, they were managing anywhere between 300 and 700 units. And I hired them, for one, because they did a phenomenal job, but for two, because I wanted to take all their systems. And I really wanted to dive in deep to understand how they do it. And they're still very, very good friends of mine to this day, invited to my wedding, and that's really the backbone of my company, of always just being around the right people that did it at a high level to understand how they think and how to make it work for my company. Because I knew that day eventually is I was going to sell all the units. So I built my Springfield portfolio up to 30 units. My biggest unit was 16. And the way I was able to get that 16 unit is I used seller financing. In Boston, that's unheard of, but in Springfield, Massachusetts, I was able to get 10% seller financing. So I only had to put 10% down. I made good money on that. I learned a lot. And then once the time came, I sold it to buy more property in Boston market.
Gotcha. Yeah, great strategy. So you alluded to this a little bit, but is there any part of you that's wanting to try to scale up into larger commercial multifamily? Obviously, you're working on the 28 unit development with your partner. But is there any part of you that wants to try to focus on that on a larger scale, larger commercial multifamily? Or are you more interested in doing smaller deals but higher volume?
A little bit of both. I feel like in real estate, it's like playing Monopoly. You got to get those little houses to turn to bigger houses and hotels, try to get on boardwalk. That's the name of the game. So I feel now, right now, where I am in my career, I'm really taking on learning how to build bigger projects, getting more comfortable with it. And eventually what I would like to do is why not have 28 units in Boston and keep it, and the numbers obviously have to make sense. The network has to make sense. The financing has to make sense. But definitely I want to get bigger units. I think for me, having all that stuff in one area, I mean, and that was the biggest thing that I learned when I had so many houses in Springfield. I was like, wait a minute, I'm paying this for this snow removal, and then I got to go to this house and I'm paying for this one. I was like, wait a minute. That's when I decided to buy the 16 unit because I had the twos, the threes. I'm like, this doesn't make sense. After I bought that 16, that light bulb went off. I'm like, this makes sense.
Yeah. Love it. That's a great story. Well, look, Jose, I appreciate you sharing your journey thus far. And I love talking with guys like you that have really had to build from the ground up, right? And be resourceful with what you have and figure out ways to be creative and find value in deals that others might have passed up. And so hearing your story is inspiring. I want to start winding down here, but I've got, three final questions for you. The first is, what's the biggest mistake that you've made so far on your real estate investing journey that we could all learn from?
Yeah, I got burned by a contractor. So my first rehab project, it went terrible, horrible. I had to borrow money from my ex-girlfriend. It was,
Oh, wow. That is bad.
It was that bad. But what I learned was that, you know what, I was sitting in the wrong seat of my own company. And that's where the light bulb really came off, that I wanted to focus on the construction and the development aspect of my company. So that was the best mistake that ever happened to me. And I can't tell you how happy I am when I think about it. I was like, remember those days?
So how clarify for me when you say you were sitting in the wrong seat of your own company. What does that mean?
That means that I felt that, I wasn't bringing enough value to my company as a real estate investor, or say like a real estate agent, because like I said, most of my competition are agents and investors, and most of them have to hire the construction. Because as you know, most real estate investors will say, well, the first thing you have to do for a good deal is get to buy the right deal. You got to buy it low enough. And I'm like, that's true until you start construction, right? So you kind of have to have both,
Yeah.
So I think that's really most real estate investors where they go wrong, is not being able to control that construction or development project.
Gotcha. And you feel like that is your unique strength, is to focus on that side of the business.
That's I definitely believe that is my strength, and I'm doubling down on it. I'm continuing to educate myself on it. I just recently been accepted into Clark Construction, and down in Maryland, they have a program for general construction managers. And I didn't think I was going to get into it because I don't live in Maryland. But I submitted it, and they approved it because it's Zoom.
Oh, that's great.
Virtual class.
Yeah, good for you. Congratulations on that.
Thank you.
Next question I've got for you. What's the biggest win you've had on your real estate investing journey so far?
I would say definitely get my wife to buy into my dream, because if she's not happy, I'm not going to be happy. And I'm happy she has been, fully committed to helping me, understanding. Like I said, I'm a fire lieutenant. My last semester at Wentworth, I was doing 4 classes. I was still going to the firehouse. I was still running my construction sites, and it was a lot. But the way I pitched it to her, it was like, listen, I could take 2 classes now and then take 2 more classes in the summer, or I can just say, you know what, let's get this 4 and then we can do whatever we want in the summer. So she really bought into it. But also too, as a married man, when your wife is ready to settle. Right. And I see you smiling, so you know what I'm talking about. And so I had a conversation with my wife, and I could tell she's ready to settle. And I said, you know what? I'm a real estate investor. I don't got time to be buying rings and all this stuff. I go, engagement rings. So I said, you know what? I got to figure this out. So I had to think more creatively again. So I said, you know what? I got a plan. I said, she already owned a 2-family at this time. I said, let's refinance your 2-family and move it to a conventional loan. And then you can use another first-time home buyer's loan. This was 2 years ago. We bought a rental property, owner occupied. We live in there, and we bought it for 705. So she just refinanced so she can knock out the PMI, and we got the appraisal yesterday at 900,000.
Oh, wow. That's great. That's great. Okay. Last question for you. What's the best advice that you have for someone who's just starting their real estate investing journey?
Mentorship and partnership, like anybody that has done it, that's willing to help you out and understand it, because it's always easier. And I say that from the point of view of where I feel like I'm kind of like in that middle stage where I'm not a beginner, but I'm not advanced, because I couldn't do these 28 units by myself. But if somebody can walk me through this 28 unit and then another 31 units, then I can continue to grow. And it's the same as the beginning, like guys call me every day and they say, hey, how do I do this? Because it's a lot safer. And it can be something as small as like, hey, do you mind coming to my job site every 2 weeks, or take a look at this, or how would you do that? But you need to have somebody show you the way. It's such a value add. I was recently talking to my mentor, and he has 2 daughters. And I asked him a question, and he goes, I can't answer this question until September. And I said, what do you mean? We're going to have dinner, and I'm going to sit there, and I'm going to explain this to you. And what people don't realize, they talk about generational wealth, but they fail to talk about generational knowledge. And he's like, I've been developing for years, and my daughters want to be nurses. They want to do this, but they don't want to develop. So I'm going to pass this down to you. And that's really where the light bulb really clicked. The knowledge is there. You just have to find the right people that's willing to give that knowledge to you. But it also comes that in order to get that knowledge, you have to be hungry. Yeah. You have to bring value. For example, the 7-unit project that I was telling you that I'm doing with my JV partner. Well, I got that deal because 3 years prior to that, I wholesaled him a deal. I made 50,000 and he made 300. So when I call, he's going to answer, so that was the value add. Like, this guy's hungry. He wants to go places, and now we're partners. So it started off as giving him deals to a partnership.
Yeah, that's a great example. Well, Josue, again, I just want to thank you for your time and sharing your journey with us. Thank you for your service in the military and at the fire department, 12 years at the fire department, and then making a transition into real estate full time. Great story. You're an inspiring guy that has a great outlook on this whole business of being resourceful and finding value and giving first and trying to add value anywhere that you can. And so I appreciate you coming on and sharing your strategies and ideas with us. What's the best way for our listeners to connect with you, learn more about your business, and explore opportunities with you?
Instagram, definitely. Instagram. My Instagram is Jose_Winter_Hill_Homes.
Okay. Awesome.
And I also want to add, when my wife did buy that house, I was her broker, and that's how I bought the ring.
See, resourceful. That's we'll put a bow on this episode with that comment. So, Jose, thank you for coming on. Thanks for sharing your journey with us and helping us with our journeys. And I look forward to connecting with you again soon.
Thank you. I appreciate it.